So I'm going to give everybody a few minutes, and everybody who's taken the class, I'm going to show you the palette here. So start getting your palette set up. I got to add a couple more colors. You won't need more than just a little tiny scoop, one of those little scoops that you have. Just one little scoop, barely any of the darker green, and then more of the orange. You definitely want more of the orange. So the color we're starting with is the orange, and I'm going to show you how to map this out. It's going to make it easier for painting this. So what you want to do is you want to pick up your smallest brush. That would be your liner. And then what you want to do is go right into your orange. If anybody's having trouble seeing, I can always try to make it a little brighter with the sunlight, but that's super bright. Okay, so pick up your smallest brush, and I want you to just mix up a tiny bit of that orange. It doesn't matter the consistency for this, and we're just mixing it with water because Sugarprism works great with water. If you want a faster dry time with Sugarprism, you really want to avoid Everclear. Everclear is too high in alcohol content, so it can fade out some of those pretty color crystals, and you don't want that. If you want a faster dry time, just use vodka with it. It works great with vodka and water. Okay, so just picking up a little tiny bit of that orange on your smallest brush. What we're going to do is we're going to map this out. So where our pumpkin starts on this side, I want you to first mark the very middle on the left side of your canvas. And then I want you to also mark about 1/4 of the way up from that. And that's going to be our starting point for the pumpkin. Maybe even just a little tad higher, but somewhere about 1/4 of the way down from the top. Okay. And then where you want to bring it down on the bottom here is find the center point of your canvas and just give it a little dot. And it doesn't matter because we're going to fill all this area in, okay? And then I want you to mark, okay, find the 1/4 point from the center here, and then bring it in just a little bit further. So you're about 1/3 of the way in from the right and about 2/3 of the way. Okay, so that would be about 1/3. So we're about 2/3 over. Okay, so these are the two most important points on your piece right now. This right here, about 1/4 of the way down, and this right here, about 2/3 of the way in. So now going back into that orange again, I want you to mix the consistency. All right. Yeah, mix the consistency about like acrylic paint, maybe just a little bit thinner. You don't want it super watery, but you definitely want to be able to what I call pull or drag a line. And then an artist tip I always give people, when you're mixing your paint up, it kind of gets gooped up on your brush, and you don't want that because you can't get nice fine lines with the very tip of your brush. If you look at your paintbrush, they're not blunt cut. They actually come down to a nice little taper, and what I want you to do when we're doing fine painting is concentrate on the very last, you know, 1 or 2 hairs on the end of your brush. So what I do is I go in, I push most of the paint off, and then I clean my brush off after I was mixing it, and then I pick up a little bit of paint. So you can see the consistency is kind of thick, but still thin enough to paint a line without it skipping too much. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I want you to imagine, now let's start on the bottom here, it might be a little bit easier. I want you to just touch down where your marker is and just start making a little curve up. And you can see how it skipped a little bit, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to add a little bit more paint. So I want you to make just a curve, you know, nothing complicated, and you're going to come up about the same height as this marker over here, okay? Don't draw a line straight across, but just visually mark about how high this curve needs to come. And give it some nice curve. You want a nice plump pumpkin. If the paint seems too thick to paint with, just go in and add just a little bit more water, and just like a nice little curve like that. Alright, and once you've got that curve on, what we're going to do is pick up a little bit more of that orange and then come over, and we're going to sort of give this an apple shape. So about to the center here, if you visually picture a line going straight across, we're going to come down a little bit further. So what you want to do is just start here and just give it a nice curve and swoop down. And then just curve it back up, just like that. Make sure you have a nice rounded top like this. And you don't have to swoop down too far, just a little curve down. This looks a little funny, so I'm going to make my pumpkin a little more plump right here. And if your pumpkin doesn't look like mine, that's not really the goal. I always tell my students I'm just here to guide you. It's always fun after class to see all of the different pretty pumpkins that people paint. Okay, so I'll give you just a minute to get that curve on like that. Nothing crazy or complicated. Okay. All right, let's move on. So now all we're going to do is pick up your medium fluffy brush and go in and mix up a little bit more of that orange. And you can see it takes very little. I really honestly have way too much orange on my palette here. It takes very little Sugarprism paint to do any job. We're not even going to use a fraction of what I have on my palette here. So if you compare that to what you get in the big packets online for ordering, you really get a lot of product for your money. Plus with Sugarprism you can also airbrush with it, so you're getting more than one product in one. Okay, so just a nice smooth acrylic consistency, and all I want you to do is just go in and start painting it in. And we're going to add all those pretty details in here, so it doesn't have to be super perfect. Just going in and filling it in really quick. Another nice thing about Sugarprism, it is a really nice vanilla flavor, which you don't get from other products that have a strange, like, bitter dye alcohol flavor. Sugarprism is nice vanilla, which pairs with any dessert or treat. Make sure when you're mixing the paint, you really give it a good mix. See how I'm pushing paint in there? Make sure you give it a good mix. You want to make sure all those pretty color crystals are activated in there. If anybody has any questions at all, it doesn't even have to be related to this design that we're painting. You know, just throw them out there. Sugarprism works on everything. I'm painting on just a little piece of fondant. It works exactly the same on royal icing, gum paste, modeling chocolate. You can paint modeling chocolate. You can paint all kinds of chocolate with it. All kinds. You can airbrush on all those surfaces also. You can change the color of isomalt. I know isomalt companies have pretty isomalt colors, but with Sugarprism you can get opaque isomalt colors. You just melt your isomalt, add a little bit of powder, mix it around, and then heat it up again, mix it, and you'll get like really pretty opaque colors. On cookies, I would be mindful about this edge and paint the edge. It just looks a little bit better. For this project, it's not super necessary, but I would definitely paint the edges on your own projects. Okay, I'll give you a minute just to get caught up on that. Like I said, if anybody needs me to slow down or has any questions, just throw that out there. I'm using water. Sugarprism works super great with water. If you want it to dry faster, use the vodka, but stay away from Everclear. Everclear is too high in alcohol content and it can fade out some of those pretty color crystals, so just avoid that. Save your money. Just use water. 99% of the time I'm using just water. On chocolate, I might recommend vodka for a faster dry time because chocolate has a greasier surface, but I've even painted on chocolate with using just water. I always tell people, take your vodka, put it in a glass, add some ice and some cranberry or orange juice, and just throw a straw in there and drink it while you're making cookies. Okay, so moving on. Second here. Alright, so now what we want to do is, our next step is picking up your finest brush, the liner. We're going to go into our red, and I know this is a little strange for you guys because they look very pastel until you get the liquid in there. But just add a little drop in there, make sure you have the red. And again, you want it to a smooth acrylic consistency. Another nice thing about Sugarprism is it is powder, so you can dilute it down to watercolor consistency. For airbrushing, I would say mix it to about the consistency of chocolate milk. Maybe a little bit thicker than that for chocolate painting. You can have acrylic. You can stamp with it. It works great with stamps. I had one customer freeze a buttercream cake and then, okay, see how I mixed it up and then I've got a clean brush. That's important. She froze a buttercream cake and then she took these really pretty like Eiffel Tower and flower stamps and she stamped right onto the frozen buttercream. It was so pretty. All right, so now going in and picking up some of that red with your fine brush. What I want you to do is, this is about the center of our pumpkin, okay? We're not going to start there. We're going to move a little bit over to the sides, about there and there. So this is our center point, and we're going to add our first two lines to the left and the right of that. Now for these, all you want to do is touch down and then give it a curve out. Give it a nice plump curve out, okay? So what I do is I touch down, and as I'm coming towards the center, I start lifting and lifting so there's less hairs touching in the middle, and I'll explain just in a second why we do that. And then the same thing on this side. Touch down, start making your curved line out, kind of lift in the middle. It doesn't matter if it skips and stutters, we're going to go back in. And then it becomes darker on the bottom again. And what you're doing by adding heavier lines at the top and the bottom and leaving it sort of blank in the middle is you're creating a sense of light source now. We're going to add more and more to this, so it's going to get even more defined as we go along. Okay, I'll give you a minute for that. So just touch down, start dragging it down on a curve, lift up a little bit, and then when you come back down, touch down again a little bit harder. Touch down, lift, and then touch down. All right, so everybody's at that point. Again, going back into your red. Now we're going to add our other lines. You're going to do exactly the same thing, except we're not doing a curve here and a curve here. The reason why you see a curve on both sides in the middle section of your pumpkin is because that one section you're looking, your vision is more straight on to that one section. So you're going to see both sides on the curves on that. And then over here, the same thing, just moving a little bit further over on the top of your pumpkin, but then curving out. Okay, so start close, about a 1/4 inch, and then curve out. And as you're curving out, you want to lift, lift, lift. And then as you curve, you keep curving, you're going to come back down and you're going to be sort of close again. Okay, so you're close here, and then it gets wider in the center like that. And if your lines are solid all the way through, don't worry about it. That's totally okay. Because we're going to add lots of shading. We're going to be layering lots of colors on top of this. I'll show you. So we're going to be layering lots of colors on this to make it all pop out and look more two-dimensional. And then to the right of that, we're going to add one more section. So coming up, just moving over just a little bit. And adding one more curve out. And coming back in. You can see mine is kind of wonky. It kind of a little peek at there. I'm not even worried about that. And then the same thing on this side. You want to move just a little bit further over from this. And then swing out. Gets a little bit wider. And then as you curve down, it gets closer. And then I'm going to add just a little tiny one up here, a little partial. Just like that. Alright, peeking up to see if there's any questions. I have to run, but I'll catch up later. Thank you so much for being so generous. Oh, you're so sweet, Daily Cookie Official. Yeah, it's going to take me a while to edit this. It always does because these classes are several hours long. So it takes a while to edit, but I will definitely edit it and then put it into our group on the Facebook page. In 3 days, I guess, when they let me back on there. So, all right, moving on. If everybody's ready at that point. Now, with the same red, we're going to do something a little bit different. I want you to pick up your medium-sized fluffy brush. Okay? And when I say fluffy, they're flexible. Most of the time when you see me working, I'm always working with nice, soft, flexible brushes. That's important to get nice, smooth, clean paintings. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into that red, mix up a little bit more, but this time I want it just a little bit thinner than what we've been working with. Okay, you don't want it watercolor consistency, but it's definitely a little thinner than what we've been working with. And then what we're going to do is on the sides and just a little bit here and there with the red, what I want you to do is I just want you to do this, what I call feathering. Let me show you on a paper towel first. What you do is you touch down and just sort of pull it, just sort of very lightly with the tip of your paintbrush, not just the very tip this time, but you know, press down just a little bit and lift, so you're touching and pulling just lightly. Okay, now what we're doing is you're doing it on both sides of all your red lines, and now we're going to start creating some definition. Okay, and you can bring it in, see how it's close to that, and then I just added a couple little lines a little further in. Okay, you can do that on both sides. You don't have to be perfect, we're just starting some definition. We're going to layer lots of colors here. For me, on this one, it's a little easier to start at the bottom and just sort of feather up a little bit. And as they go in or away from that center line, they get kind of lighter and lighter and thinner and thinner. Another great thing about Sugarprism that you don't get with other products is if you make a mistake, or if you add too much paint, or if you just don't like something that you did, you can just take all the paint off your paintbrush and then clean it off. Just, you know, take the water off on a paper towel, go in with just a damp paintbrush and literally remove color, so you can, I guess, erase in a sense with Sugarprism. It's also a nice vanilla flavor. I think I mentioned that earlier. So just a little bit heavier. You can see Sugarprism is very smooth. You're not struggling with it. It truly works like a real acrylic paint. This is the third live pumpkin painting class that I've held. I didn't think that many people would want to paint pumpkins, and I almost didn't even post my design when I had it, because I thought, I don't know about this. And then when I did, you know, people just went sort of gangbusters for it. Okay. So you don't have to think about it too much. You can even come in, just add a couple little other little swipes here and there. I wouldn't do too much in the center. And then what I want you to do is I want you to come down to the bottom here, and I'll explain why. Right here, we're going to add our lilac, or some of you may have purple, but we're going to add that hue right here just a little bit, and then come in with our darker. So what that does is, this is a very, I don't know, nighttime pumpkin patch. We have like a darker sky, but we still have a light source right here. So since our light source is coming from here, this is going to be the furthest point from our light source. So I always add just a little bit more color down in this corner, and then I also add more to the bottom of the pumpkin, because those are going to be our darkest sources. And then the way I explain like two-dimension and light, getting two-dimension in a painting or a drawing is just light, and dark. And how I explain it is, if you look at your fingers and point the top of your fingers towards your light source, if it's a lamp or your laptop or the sun or whatever, what you're going to notice is, even though the skin on the top of your fingers is relatively the same color, we're going to pretend that this is our pumpkin sections. If you look at the top of your fingers or pumpkin section, that is almost, if the light is super bright, it almost literally appears like it's white. And then as you look down into these little crevices, it turns very, very dark color. So that's all we're doing, is we're creating light and dark to make it look like our pumpkin is popping up off of that canvas. Okay. So coming in and just adding some of the red to the bottom, just pulling, just touching and pulling up. And make sure you're following, when you add these lines, all the lines, you're following the direction of your sections. You don't want to come straight up, because our pumpkin is curved. Okay, that's another way to create a two-dimension, is you need to follow the direction of your painting of the sections. All right, I'll give you a minute to just add that to the bottom. Okay, so moving on, the next color that we're going to add is, now we're going to come in and we're going to pick up some of our brown, believe it or not. We're going to add even less, but we're going to basically do the same thing. Okay, so still using your smallest brush, your liner. Again, mixing it up to just a smooth acrylic consistency. For those just joining in, we're just adding water to the Sugarprism. You can use vodka for a faster dry, but definitely avoid the Everclear. So just adding a little water to a very smooth consistency. And then get that brush cleaned off so it's nice and clean. Picking up some of that brown. We're going to go in and we're going to add, just like we did the red, but less because this is a darker color. Now you're really going to start seeing these sections in your pumpkin start to pop out. So just lightly start touching down here, touch, and then drag it out. And then just barely touching down in the center, and then as you come to the bottom, touching back down. And then do that with all of your lines except for this one, and I'll explain why. Do it on the bottom of this outside section. And just barely, 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 just a tiny little bit on that section right there. But definitely on the bottom there. Okay, so the same thing with these ones. Touching down, lifting, and then touching down. Touching down. Again, touching down, lifting, and then touching down and lifting those bristles. I'm going to have to talk everybody into signing up for Zoom because this really kind of makes me crazy not being able to see what everybody's doing. But nobody's asking questions so far, so I think we're doing pretty good. And then again, adding more of that brown over to our darkest part of our pumpkin. And then once you have those brown lines on, all you do is you do the same thing as we did with the red. You mix your brown just a hair thinner. Not watercolory, but just a nice, smooth, thin acrylic. And then see how we did the red, and the red's is sort of starting to define because we did red on both sides of the red lines that we added. You do the same thing with the brown, but maybe not quite as much because that's a very dark color. Okay, just a little bit of brown on both sides. And that goes for a lot of painting, is you normally start with your lighter colors and then you start adding layers of color on top. Don't be afraid to add a couple little floating random lines in there. Just make sure you're following the direction of your pumpkin. And then remember how I said the bottom of our pumpkin is the darkest? Go in and do the same thing. Just swipe some of that brown up. Just feather it up, touching and pulling on the bottom. And they don't all have to be the same height when they come up. They would actually be a little bit higher as we come out to the outside of our pumpkin. Okay. I wouldn't add a whole lot on this area. Again, that's our light source. Touching down, pulling, touching down, pulling up, and following the direction of your pumpkin sections. For those of you who are just following along watching, I have a page on Facebook called Painting with Sugarprism. You'll see this pumpkin in the background when you find the right page. I offer for people that order the kits to participate in the class, or people that have ordered the sets of the paints off of the website or have the paints from the expos. I offer a lot of free classes, and this was one of them. This was one of our free classes to join in on. It's also a fun way to just test out Sugarprism if you want to, because I have like these little mini kits that you can order, and it comes with the colors needed for this project, but it still has enough in the kits to go off and paint several more. So it's a great way to just test it out before you jump in and just buy, the whole full set if that's what you prefer to do. Alright, so I'm going to give everybody just a couple minutes to get those brown lines on. And then we're going to come in and we're going to add one more color to this. At that point, we're going to move on to the next color. And we're going to go into the darkest color on our palette, and that is the Scotland Green. Using your smallest brush, your liner, go in, and the same consistency. We're going to do exactly what we did with the other two colors, with the red and the brown. And now this is really going to start making those sections pop out. Okay. Actually, let's change that. I'm going to add some highlighting before I add that darkest color. Let's go in and add some highlights before the last low light. So back to our medium size brush. I want you to go in and mix up some of that dandelion yellow. And you're going to love how this really starts popping out those sections. So for the yellow, because we're painting up over the top of darker colors, you want it a little bit thicker. So this time, see how I can literally pick it up with my paintbrush? You want it thick. You don't want it super pasty, but you definitely want it to a thicker consistency. Okay. Push that color off your brush, clean it out. Little artist tip, try to keep your brushes clean. And then pick up some of that yellow. Not a lot, a little bit on the ends. And then we're going to come to the inside sections of our pumpkin. And we're going to start up here because our light source is coming from here from behind the pumpkin. We're going to add a little bit more yellow to this section. Okay. And the same thing, just touching down, I call it feathering, just kind of swiping down, make sure you're following the shape of your pumpkin section, sort of curve like this. You don't want it solid, but you definitely want more in this area of your pumpkin. Okay, see how it's starting to add some highlight, making those sections pop out more. And then move on over here to the other parts of your pumpkin. Oops, I got a little piece in there. I didn't mix my yellow up good enough. Okay. So for these other sections, you want to sort of more focus towards the center of that section because that's the highest point on that. Remember the highest point on your pumpkin section. So you're going to have lighter here, so that's where you want to add more yellow, and then you can drag a little bit down to, or up to the top and down to the bottom, but it's really more the center sections that you're focusing on for the highlights. And for this, since you're looking straight on, this is that one focal point where you're looking straight onto this one section, you can add a little bit more to the very center of this one. Okay, so back and forth, following the direction, just feathering some of that on. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look like mine. I'm just here to guide you. And you know, this is a very abstract pumpkin, and this is a quote. This is my quote. And I say this to my students a lot. Unless you're creating realism, there are no rules in art, therefore you cannot make mistakes. Let me say that again. Unless you're painting or drawing realism, there are no rules in art. Therefore you cannot make mistakes. You can literally make this pumpkin purple, blue, pink and black. You can add polka dots. It's your artwork. You can make it any way you want. So again, it doesn't have to look like mine. And I hope some of you do go. I had one of a student from my first class. After she took this class, she went off and she made this beautiful blue pumpkin. If you scroll down on my page, you can see it. It's really pretty, and it's blue. It looks like something out of a Cinderella story. Okay, and then not too much down in this section because that's furthest away from our light source. And then a little bit on top here because this part of our pumpkin is really sticking up a little bit higher. If you're not seeing the yellow layering on top enough, just go in and add a little bit more powder to it. You probably just need to make it a little bit thicker. You can see how nice and opaque Sugarprism is. That's plenty of yellow, so I'll give you a minute just to catch up on that. I'm going to peek up here, see if there's any questions. Feel free to ask any questions. It doesn't have to be related to this project. You can paint this on cakes, you can use it on cookies, pies, candy. It's just kind of irritating that my laptop laptop is not talking to my phone, so I don't know why we aren't getting connection. Okay, so once everybody's got their yellow on, let's go in and add the last color to this pumpkin, and then we're going to move on to the background. Okay, so going in, picking up that Scotland green that we already mixed up. Another really nice thing about Sugarprism is it doesn't expire. You can open the packages and it literally does not expire. On the back, you'll see a 2-year best before date. That's just a technicality a few states like California and New York require. And that's on any food. If you see a best before date, it's literally not an expiration date. So on the back of Sugarprism, you'll see does not expire, and then the 2-year best before date that was marked on there. But when the labs were testing it for FDA approval, they said nothing breaks down, so literally you could buy it and have it 20 years from now and it's going to work exactly the same. Okay, so just using again the very tip of your fine liner, we're going to go in and we're going to do exactly what we did with the brown and the red, but adding just very, very slight amount, because this is a very dark color. We don't need much. Okay. So touching down and lifting towards the middle, and then touching back down. Touching down, lifting here, and touching back down there. Touching down, lifting, and touching down. You see how it creates by lifting, you're almost losing your line there. You can't see any green there. You're creating more depth. You're creating more two-dimension because you're creating an effect that there's more light shining in this area. Touching down, lifting, touching down, and lifting. And again, I'm going to avoid putting too much right here because we have more light source there. I add just a couple tiny little wispies of color there. And then this time, instead of picking up the medium brush to add the lines to this, I'm going to use my liner, and I'm just going to add a little bit of that Scotland green, just small little swipes of it. And again, they don't all have to be like only this high. Make some higher, make some lower. But as they move out to the outside of your pumpkin, they're going to get a little bit higher and higher. And again, that's going to help create more two-dimension. And if your lines aren't pulling smoothly, just add a little bit more water to your paint. See how they're higher here and then they start coming in lower and lower? It's creating a roundness to your pumpkin. And again, I'm definitely adding more to the bottom of the pumpkin than the top, because the light source fades as our pumpkin tucks in the bottom. And then don't be afraid to add a few of those pretty, very lightly. You literally want to work off the last hair on the tip of your brush right there. Very light little green accent lines, which not only add depth and dimension, just adds a really pretty color palette to your pumpkin. It could be a little bit of that green life coming through that you see on some pumpkins and gourds. Pumpkins are all different colors. I think they're really pretty personally. And then, since this, again, this section is the furthest away from our light source here, you'll want to add a little bit more of that green to this section. Now, if you go off and you do this on your own and you start feeling a little overwhelmed or a little bit frustrated, or maybe if something doesn't look quite right, you can't figure it out, what I do is you need to really step away and just take a little bit. Art is not supposed to be frustrating or stressful. It's supposed to be very relaxing, and I hope this is relaxing for everybody that's on and painting with me. But it's always good to step away and look at it either from a distance, or another really good way to look at something is take a photo of it, because for some reason, I don't know why, but if you take a picture and then look at the picture, sometimes you see things on the photo that you're just not seeing when you're up close and personal to your artwork. So every once in a while, just step away, take a little breather, get a little drink of water or whatever. For everybody that's jumping on right now, feel free to ask any questions. We're doing a live pumpkin painting. I offer this class. It's on a page on Facebook. I have a painting group page. It's called Painting with Sugarprism. I have little mini kits that you can order online for a lot of my classes. A lot of my classes are free. You just have to order either the paint, the full-size paint sets, or the kit for the class to participate. I do leave the classes up and recorded for a week or two for people that weren't able to make the live time slot, so you can go back and paint that way also. I guess once finished, I will be able to watch it from the beginning. You will be able to watch it from the beginning, yeah. It's going to take me a couple hours to edit it because the painting classes are several hours long, so it takes a while to edit, but it's best to go back into I'm going to post it on the Sugarprism, Painting with Sugarprism page, and the background on that page, you'll see a pumpkin like this. That way you'll know you're on the right page. Okay, so hopefully I'm not moving too fast. If I'm moving too fast for anybody, just say hold. I get that a lot, that it's relaxing to watch me paint, and I love that. I love that people find it relaxing. Sometimes I jump on really late at night and I just paint. I don't really, it's not really Q&A, I just paint, and people just get on and they watch. So that's kind of fun to know that it's relaxing. You finally found me, Kelly's Custom Cookies. Don't worry that that we're at this point. I'm going to edit this and post it on the event on the Painting with Sugarprism page. It's going to be on the live pumpkin painting class number 3 event. This is the 3rd live that I've held for this pumpkin. All right, so moving on. Oops. So moving on, we have everything on our pumpkin that we need on there. And we're going to start working with the background. So what you want to do is you want to pick up your largest fluffy brush. And when I say large, that's normally somewhere between a 7 and a 10 size brush. I would say that's probably closer to a 7 or 8. And when I say fluffy, I mean flexible. In order to get nice, smooth application of paint, any paint really, you want to use nice, flexible, soft brushes. You know, and treat yourself to a nice set of brushes. I normally recommend 2 brands. One is called Transon, and they have these kind of funny black shape handles. They're really comfortable. I like them. The bristles don't come out. They hold up. All right, so for the background, we're going to start with the lilac. You can see the amount on this palette. That's about a gram. We're going to use not even a quarter of a gram to add that little highlight. You know, I have a whole bunch of paint on my palette. I could probably paint at least 5 more pumpkins with what I have on here. So you get a lot of product for your money, you really do. Okay, so going in and almost making a watercolor consistency. I'll show it to you over here. You don't want it soupy, super watercolor, but you want it thin. And then push out, I want you to push out most of the color that these brushes are sucking up, because we're adding very little. Now, we're going to start doing this, and it's a dabbing, and it does not have to be solid, and we're not going to do the whole background, and we're not going to come all the way down to the bottom. All we're doing by this very gently dabbing down, all we're doing is creating a light source. And when you think of light, you think of yellow or white or lighter colors, but we have a nighttime sky behind our pumpkin, and we're going to blend our midnight blue and this lilac together. And that's all I want you to do, just like that, just very lightly touching down with the tip of your bristles. Just doing this little dabbing effect. And I really like this technique, the dabbing technique, for a lot of backgrounds that I paint. Okay, just like that. Like I said, it doesn't have to be solid. Just leave it right there. You could see, I mean, I barely used, it's like a microscopic amount of the Sugarprism. You really get a lot of product for your money. And if you do go online and you decide to order, there are built-in discounts on the sets. Okay, so if you're at that point, we're going to do the same thing with the blue, but we're not going to go right over it. We're going to blend it into this lilac color. But we're going to start on the outside edges. That's the darkest part of our sky, okay? And then we're going to blend it in, and we're going to blend it over the top of the lilac just a little bit. So again, picking up just the tiniest little pinch of blue and making it maybe just a little bit thicker than that lilac at first. See how opaque it is. Now start on the edges, because you have more paint on your brush when you start. And then as you come in, don't be afraid to go right up over the top a little bit of that lilac color. This might be a little bit thick. So I would start on the edge and then bring it in as we start losing some of the paint off our brush. That way you're not covering all that pretty lilac, but you're blending them in together. And the reason why you're going up over the top with some of that blue is If you don't, you're going to have the pumpkin, then you're going to have this purple thing, and then you're going to have blue, okay? You don't want blunt stripes of color. You want blending, and a good example is, because this is a horizon, this is sort of the sun going down in the back of our pumpkin. It's not even really the sun going down, it's just like the last little remnants of sunlight. And all we're left is with this blue and purple color, which is very Halloweenish, and it matches our pumpkin beautifully. This is the midnight blue. For everybody that's jumping on, we're just mixing water into our Sugarprism paint. You can use vodka for a faster dry time, but I always tell people to avoid using Everclear because the alcohol content is too high and it can fade out some of those pretty color crystals, and you don't want that. So just this dabbing, dabbing, dabbing. Start with your darker colors on the edge. Okay, because there's more paint in your brush. Start on the edge and then just dab it in as you start losing color. I hope a lot of you go over to Facebook and check out the Painting with Sugarprism page. I've added some really fun events. We're doing this abstract butterfly and this really pretty autumn forest painting class in the next few days. We're supposed to do a pie art class. The reason why I'm over here on Instagram right now is I have no idea why, but I got the boot from posting anything for 3 days, and I don't know why, because the only thing I've posted in the last few days is like bread baking and my painting videos. I don't get it. I mean, maybe it was a music issue, but normally if they have issues with the music, then they let you know that right away. So I don't know, I don't get it, but anyway, here I am. And then if you add too much, if you feel like you've added too much color, see how I kind of splotched that blue on kind of heavy right there. What you can do, because Sugarprism is not a heavy concentrated dye like other products, just go in, clean your brush off, wipe it off on the paper towel, and with a damp brush you can literally pick the color up off of your project. And I have done the same on royal icing. I've done the same on very delicate surfaces, and it doesn't ruin or pit anything. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of the color here, and then I'm going to put down a little bit more lilac again. Okay, just like that. Presto changeo. It's so easy to fix things that you don't like or mistakes. I'm not saying that people make mistakes, but I certainly do. And that's it. Now you can see how our two colors are blended together, and what it did was created a light source. It looks like that sun is almost down, and that's a last little bit of light. You know, now our night sky is coming in, and that's the last little bit of sunlight that we have left on our horizon, peeking behind our pumpkin. So I'll give everybody just a minute to get caught up on that. We're going to move on to this crazy gnarly stem and then our leaves. All right. moving on, we're going to pick up, let's see, what do we want to do? We're going to mix up a color first. What I want you to do is I want you to take some of your yellow and just pull it up over here, or use your scoop and put a little scoop over there. But we're going to mix a color somewhere between yellow and brown, so we're mixing up a very light kind of fawn. I call it a fawn brown. I'm just going to mix it in here. When I need yellow, I'll just put more yellow in the well over here. So, because we're going to need a good amount to get that whole stem on there. So mixing the colors between the yellow and the brown, all I did was I took a little bit of that brown and I added it to my yellow. You can see Sugarprism paint mixes together really well. So you can buy a set of Sugarprism and you can make so many different colors from it. I have 24 colors right now in our color line. I also have some fat-based colors that you mix into cocoa butter for chocolate art. Okay, so you want a smooth acrylic consistency for this. We're first going to pick up our small brush for this instead of the big one, because this is going to be easier to outline it with our small brush first. Alright, so picking that up, we're going to come up here, and I don't want you to go too far out on your pumpkin. This is just the stem. So see where that middle section is? We're going to go just a little bit further on that. And don't go up in this direction. I want you to start close to the pumpkin, and then I just want you to swoop up like a little ski slope, okay? A little ski slope up. And then just start going off in, I call it a crazy road map, because our pumpkin is coming towards the end of the picking season, and now our stem is drying up and it's all withery, and don't be afraid to add a couple little loops in there like that, because pumpkin vines tend to be very curly, wavy. And I'm just going off and I'm going down a little bit lower. Just keep going wiggly lines, just like a road map, right? And then coming down and just sort of ending it somewhere in the middle here. Doesn't have to touch, but somewhere in the middle there. And then you're going to go up and you're going to do the same thing here. Except start about, I don't know, about a ½ inch from there, from that point, and touch down. And then I just want you to make a little C curve. And then as you get close to the pumpkin, it gets closer and closer. So just make a little C, and then come down and touch your pumpkin. And then, as like any plant, I mean, there are exceptions, like I think bamboo's pretty even as it grows up, but most plants, as they grow away from the plant itself, they start getting thinner and thinner, like the stems and the vines, they start getting thinner and thinner. So the further away you get, start getting closer and closer, start making that vine thinner and thinner. And still keeping it wiggly. Okay, it's drying up, it's all kind of gnarly and creeping along. And then as you get towards the end, it's just super skinny like that. Now, all we're going to do is we're going to pick up our medium-sized brush, and with that same brown, just go in and start filling it in. And it should be a little on the thicker side, so it covers right up over the top of those darker colors. That's another great thing about Sugarprism that you're not going to get from other products, is It's very opaque, just like real acrylic paint. So you can cover right up over the top of other colors. You can even do light colors over the top of dark colors, like pink and yellow and white, right up over the top of purple and blue and black. For those of you just jumping on, we're painting with Sugarprism edible acrylic paint. It's not real acrylic, it just performs like acrylic. You can also airbrush with Sugarprism. I'm just mixing it with water. It works perfectly fine. I'm painting on a piece of fondant, but it works exactly the same on gum paste, on chocolate, on bare cookie dough. Works the same on pie dough. You can bake. You can bake the pie dough after you paint on it, and it's going to hold the color through baking. I'm having a pie art decorating class in just a couple days. You can see how opaque it is, and you're not going to get bleed through on those colors. We're getting thinner and thinner and skinnier, just keeping those nice wiggly lines going off in all different directions. And then we're going to add a couple more, because pumpkin stems stem off in all different directions. We're going to add another one here and just a tiny little one here. I'm going to add another little loop on this one right here, because pumpkin stems are so curly and kind of wild. They just sort of go off in all different directions. So I'm going to add a couple little loops to my vine. Okay. Now let's add those other two little vines in there, and then we're going to start adding, just like the pumpkin, we're going to start adding some definition to our pumpkin. So starting about here, about midpoint, or somewhere up in this section, just go in and do the same thing, except this one's going to be very thin. You're not going to start super wide. It'll be a little bit wider where it connects and branches off, but the same thing. You're just going off in all these crazy directions. I'm going to add a little loop here. Don't be afraid to overlap your pumpkin. Those vines go off in all different directions. And I'm going to bring it in here. And then I'm going to make a sudden turn, and I'm going to go back off the pumpkin this way. And then maybe go down into a lower direction like that. Okay. Don't see any questions. If I missed any questions, just throw them at me. Did you go to school? Did you go to an art school before entering into the cookie art world? I did not go to art school. I don't have any formal training. I took one class in college because I thought I wanted to be an art teacher, but then when I realized all the politics involved in the education system, I didn't want to really deal with all that. I believe I'm just a natural born artist. Of course, I've had lots of practice on my own, but I was actually a custody officer for 12 years before I entered into the edible decorating industry. I was a custody officer, and it's just a miserable profession, but I was trying to create a Monet on a cake for a friend, and it wasn't working with all these colored pieces of fondant, and I started thinking how much easier it would be to just paint this on. And when I started looking around, I realized there was nothing that really performed like real paint. And it ended up being 4.5 years of research and development, or I'm sorry, 2.5 years of research and development to get this product exactly how I wanted it. And a little over 4 years of battle with the patent office. I actually hold a double patent on this product. So this is my product. I'm the originator. It's very exciting for me because I am an artist to actually invent something um, for the artist. So it's by the artist for the artist. I love saying that because it truly is by the artist for the artist kind of thing. All right, so now let's move on to making our stem nice and creepy and gnarly looking. This is a lot easier than, see how it's got texture? You feel like you can like just reach out and like feel all those crazy bumps on it. This is a lot easier than what you think. And then we're gonna add our little leaves on there. Okay, so starting with our teddy bear brown, not the brown that we just mixed up because we want this to be a little darker. I want you to go into the teddy bear brown. See, this is what we use for the stem. This is what we're using for our first color to add dimension to our stem. Okay, so nice. You want it a little bit thicker. It's acrylic, it's a smooth acrylic, but just a little bit thicker. Sugarprism's a nice vanilla flavor. You're not going to get some weird bitter flavors on your treats from this. Okay, so just picking up a tiny bit, very tiny bit on the end of that finest brush. This is how we're going to start this. See, am I zoomed in nice and close on this? Let me see if I can zoom in just to that section so you can see better what I'm doing here. What you're going to do is first we're going to work on the outside edge. Now everywhere you see a dip, and what I call a dip, it's like this is a dip and then it comes up kind of high, and this is a dip and it comes in high. There's high and there's a dip. Everywhere you see a dip, I want you to just very gently, very lightly add a tiny bit of brown and then stop and or like pick it up when you come to the high point and then touch down on the low point on the dip, 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 dip. And do that along the entire vine, just adding a tiny touch of brown into the dips. And what it's doing is we're creating light and dark, we're creating shadow to our vine. And do that all the way to the end. You want to do it all the way to the end, maybe adding a little bit, and you're adding just a tiny bit onto that curl, right? And then do that on both sides. There's the dip, there's the dip. Kind of this whole area would be kind of a dip. Dip, dip. Dip. So just touching down. When you get to the end, just touch down here and there a little bit. kind of focused on our vine right now, so I'm going to zoom into that section. Oh, I forgot to add this last little skinny little wispy vine. Let's get that one in there also. So with the lighter brown, we don't want to miss any of those yummy details. So with the lighter brown, we're just going to add one little tiny little wispy vine that goes off on kind of wildly on its own. So I'm going to just bring it down from this section. Right onto our pumpkin. Just a little skinny one, like a skinny little crazy vine, that little rebellious vine that goes off onto its own like me. This wiggly little road map, remember? Just like that. You don't have to think about it too much. And then everyone who's painting along, please post a picture of it onto the event on Facebook. The Painting with Sugarprism page is where we have a lot of our painting classes and events posted up for those of you just jumping on. I have people painting along with me. I have little kits you can order, little mini Sugarprism kits. Or if you have the paint already, you know, you can always paint along with us. I offer a lot of free classes, and this was one of them. Okay, so once you have that little vine on, going back and picking up some of that dark brown again. Let's not forget to give our tiny little vine some dark accent. So just touching here and there along. Don't have to think about it too much. Just every now and then, just here and there, just add a little bit of that dark brown to that vine. I'm going to add a little bit more over here. I really love pumpkins and gourds. I just think they're really pretty. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're first going to add a little bit of separation from our pumpkin and our vine. So just go in with your fine brush and just dab, not a solid, just dab along the edge of that pumpkin. You don't want to make your pumpkin look jaggedy, so just little tiny dabs, because pumpkins are smooth. Well, some of them are smooth, some of them are knotted up and kind of warty looking, but we're just adding a little bit of depth and darkness where that vine goes in and tucks into the center of that pumpkin. Okay. And then, once you do that, go in and still working with a thicker but smooth consistency and your fine brush. Picking in some of that brown. And all I want you to do is start adding small little lines. Now we're going to start dragging lines, and you're almost following along the same shape as the outside edge of your vine, but you're not just making a line that continues. Okay, skip. It's like put a little bit here and then skip here and put a little bit here. Here's another line here, and do that as far as you can go onto all of your vines. Okay. And you're obviously going to have more down here because it's wider. Okay. So when you get to the bottom of your vine here, make it go all the way to the bottom, because that's where it's disappearing. See how you're now creating texture? You feel like you can almost feel the bumpiness of that vine. And we're going to come in, we're going to add more colors to this, but we're just working with the teddy bear brown right now, which is the darkest brown on our palette. Okay, so just adding little crinkly, little wavy lines. Like I said, do it as far as you can get it, as far as you can reach. Just like that. Let's zoom in, see if you can see that. See that? See how the lines are on the bottom of that vine there? Just sort of following along the same shape of the vine. Hello, everybody who's just jumping on. This is Painting with Sugarprism. This is a class that I offer on the Painting with Sugarprism page on Facebook. We're on Instagram right now, but I'm going to edit this and add it to the events, and I have some other really fun classes that I'm offering right now. One is the Autumn Forest, and there's another one, let's see, October, I think 2nd and 4th. It's an abstract butterfly and then an Autumn Forest painting class, and I have kits that you can order to join in and paint along with us. The class is free, it's just that you need the kit or some Sugarprism paint to paint along or to join the event. Alright, so once you get those little wiggly brown lines on, now we're going to add our highlight before we add the low light, just like we did the pumpkin, remember? We came in and we added the yellow, and then we came in and we added the darkest color on our palette. So we're going to do the same thing to our vine to make it pop out even more, to give it more light and shadow. So what you want to do, again with your small liner, just mixing a little bit of water into that yellow. You definitely want it thick. I'm thinking about offering a watercolor painting class also. A lot of people like painting the watercolor flowers. But for this one, you want it thick. See how you can pick it up and hold it? Alright, push that down off of your paintbrush. Clean your paintbrush off. You want nice clean brushes when you're painting. And then go in, pick up some of that yellow. And then we're doing the same thing. We're adding the yellow. We're just sort of like weaving in little streaks of yellow, not as much as the brown. We don't want a ton of highlights because we have a night sky. So we're just adding a little bit of yellow here and there. Kind of not so much here because that's the darkest part on our vine, but just streak some in, and do that on all 3 vines all the way to the end. Just a tiny little bit of yellow in there. For anybody who would like to take this class, the events are on Painting with Sugarprism. You can always take it. I don't know if I'm going to do another live, but you can always go back and watch the recorded version. So you can still order the kits if you want to, and paint this if you want to, just off of the recorded. I'll have the recorded version on Facebook in a few days. I don't know what happened. I don't know. Facebook said that I'm restricted for a few days, and I can't really figure out why, because all I've been painting is, or posting is painting and like bread, like my sourdough bread posts or something. So I guess a lot of people have been having issues with Facebook. Alright, so just a little bit of yellow, wiggly lines, little road map lines. Okay, I think that's enough yellow in there. And then our last color is going to be the Scotland green. So I'll give you a minute to get caught up here. Maybe a little tiny bit more there. Any questions? Is it better than cocoa butter painting? Is it better than cocoa butter painting? I'm not sure what you mean by that question. You can use the Sugarprism edible acrylic paint on chocolate. You can hand paint it, and you can also airbrush with it on chocolate. And the difference is when you paint on chocolate with a Sugarprism edible acrylic, it's going to dry. It's going to look like this. It's going to look like a painting on chocolate. Sugarprism also has fat-based paints. I don't have the 4 new colors posted on the website yet, but I have fat-based paints, and it's a dry mix. It's a different formula than this, but it's a dry mix that you add into melted cocoa butter, and it's created for chocolate art. And the difference is with the cocoa paint, or with the fat-based paint, it's going to re-solidify and become part of your chocolate. And it tastes like chocolate, and it looks and it feels like chocolate, but it's colored. So I have 2 different types of paints. I have this acrylic type, which is 100% edible. And then I have the other type that you mix into cocoa butter, so you can use either one on chocolate. I'm really excited about our new colors. I'm discontinuing the pastel colors if you're interested in pastel colors. But the 4 new colors I have are really pretty and vibrant. It's like I call it serpentine green. I have cranberry. I have pirate's gold. And then I have the Sailor Boy blue. So they're really vibrant, pretty colors. I really should do a demo. I should do a class with the cocoa butter paint so people can see that. Okay, so moving on to the last color on our stem, and then we're going to add our leaves. So the last color again is the darkest color on our palette, and that is the Scotland green. Again, mixing it up kind of thick. You can see it takes very, very little paint to do any job. I used less than a gram for, this was like a fraction of a gram that I used for the blue. See how much coverage you got? This was maybe a gram in my palette, and I used not even a quarter of what was on there, not even a quarter of a gram. And in the packets that you buy online, there's 40 grams in a packet. So you get a lot of product. Plus you can airbrush with Sugarprism, so that's fun. Alright, so coming in with that green, all we're going to do is just start doing what we did with the yellow and the brown. Don't be afraid to come down and give some of those dips some of that darker. You don't have to do all of them because this is a really super dark color, but do add a little bit of that green first to your dips. And give all of the vines some of that. You want to really define them. This is the color that's really making them pop out. And then go in and start adding some streaks of that green through there like this. Keeping them wiggly like everything else. Might even want to add just a little touches of that dark green down in the bottom of that stem, because that's the darkest part on our vine, so we add a little bit more dark down there. And for those of you who think that you can't do art, I have had so many people tell me I can't paint a stick figure. Leave the classes just completely thrilled with what they painted. I had one gal, she was painting, she said her husband came in at the beginning of her pumpkin and he was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so mean." And then at the end of the class, she's like, "Hey, I really like my pumpkin." And then I guess when her husband saw her finished pumpkin the next day, he didn't even believe that she painted it. So I'm very, very step by step. I'm very thorough. So if you think that you can't, you honestly can. Okay, so just adding some of that pretty, oh, I love this color, the Scotland green. And that's about all you need on the vines. And we're going to do one last little tiny thing with the vines before we move on to the leaves. Okay, so now moving on to the last little thing that we have to finish that vine off. Working from the very, very last few hairs on your brush, I want you to pick up just a very tiny amount of that Scotland green. Okay, just a little tiny amount. Now, sometimes when you see pumpkins, and even towards the end of the pumpkin picking time, you know, see this vine is sort of dying off. Every once in a while you get these tiny little vines, these little green vines that shoot out through a vine that looks like it's almost dead. So what we're going to do is we're going to touch down over here and just add a couple really small little curly vines that go off into nowhere. Okay, just like that. And we're going to add maybe one over here. Just tiny little curly pieces. Maybe not even a curly one here, just a little one that comes off there. And maybe a super tiny little one over here. Just gives it this sort of whimsical, fun little detail to our pumpkin vine. Just like that. And then we're going to move on to the leaves. So I'll give you a minute to add your little wispy vines. All right, so moving on to our one last little detail, and I'm going to make these leaves very easy for you. Pumpkin leaves for this, there's different varieties of pumpkins. For this one, the leaves tend to be kind of this shape. Pumpkin leaves are very wide, hardy leaves, and they're kind of in this shape. So if, say you drew a line down, and then you had these big, wide, we're just going to call them lips or eye shape. You have like mean, they're not exactly like this, but they're basically this shape. Okay, kind of 5 big sections. And we don't have to worry about them being very wide and vibrant like that because our pumpkin, that vine, is dying off. So our leaves are going to be sort of like wilted here and sagging here in just different shapes and colors. So how we're going to do this is we're going to start with our smallest brush, and we're going to mix up some of that grasshopper green, just adding a little water. And then what we're going to do is, remember, clean your brush off after you mix with it. You don't want all that paint gooped up in there. We're going to start down here with our lowest leaf, and all I want you to do is just start with a straight line that shoots right off of that vine like that. It's going to look kind of funny at first, but after we get all the colors in and more pieces added, it'll make more sense. So remember I said that leaf kind of had 5 sections. So what we're going to do is, this is sort of the bottom section leaf. All I want you to do is go 1, 2, 3, 4, and they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be the same length. Remember I said our leaves are kind of like dying off and sort of wilty and just sort of strange, different shapes. So that's all I want you to do. Let me zoom in on this so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. So it looks very like stick figure-ish and very kind of strange right now, but what we're going to do is you're going to come in and now you're going to start making those wide sections. It doesn't have to be super wide on both sides because, like I said, it's kind of wilting. I mean, this could be sagging down in this direction, and this one could be kind of thin because it's kind of crumpling up and withering. And then maybe this one's a little bit wider, and if they touch each other, that's okay too, because you know they're all crumpling up and it's foliage, so everything is overlapping. So all you're going to do is come in and just add a little bit of more shape to those leaves, but they don't have to be perfect. Okay, so see how it's all kind of misshapen and kind of strange? That's good. We kind of want that because it's all withery. And we're going to add the base color, and then we're going to come in and we're going to add more definition when we got that done. Okay, so for this one, we're sort of shooting off into, this one's kind of withering and sagging down, kind of facing more towards the ground. This one we'll add a little bit further up. We're not going to add it too far up because we want some of those leaves to overlap and touch on these a little bit. So coming up just a little bit, I'm going to point this one off more in this direction. Okay, well, let's make this one a little bit bigger too, a little bit longer. And then remember, 1, 2, I'm going to point this one up in this direction. We're giving our leaves some movement now. This one's kind of pointing down, and then this one is sort of off into a diagonal direction. We're giving our leaves movement. Now come in and just start adding some width to those leaves. Remember the lip or eye shape. See how these 2 leaves are touching down here? That's totally okay. That's kind of what I wanted to do. like a little overlapping of our foliage. This one's kind of gnarly and wiggly on the end because it's really crumpling up, withering away. This one's a little bit wider. If I'm moving too fast for anybody who's following along, just let me know. I don't have a problem slowing down and a little bit and waiting. I can get away. This is very second nature for me, so I don't want to get too far away from anybody. So we're just adding some width to our little stick leaves. I swear, every time I have a live class, everybody starts busting up. I swear these are not marijuana leaves, okay? Just know that right now. These are not cannabis leaves. Unless you want them to be. I mean, it's your pumpkin, so you just make it any way you want to make it. And then when you have that second leaf on, we're going to come over here and just add a little random hanging leaf over here. Hello, Columbia. Nice to have you on. We are doing some pumpkin painting. We're focusing on our leaves right now. Just waiting for everybody to get caught up. This is a class. This was a free class that I offer from my Facebook page called Painting with Sugarprism. Having issues with Facebook, so I had to have everybody jump over to Instagram. Okay. So once everybody's got that second little leaf on, we're going to add a tiny little third one sort of hanging off by itself. Now, going back into that grasshopper green. You can see how, for everybody jumping on, how beautifully opaque Sugarprism paint is. You can also airbrush with it, so you get more than one product in your purchase. Okay, so on this pumpkin, I have all three leaves on the same vine. But I think I'm going to add our third leaf over here on our little wiggly vine, and it's just the same thing. You're first just starting off with just a line, just a simple line. Let's add our little leaf right here, and this one's sort of sagging and kind of sad and pointing straight down towards the ground. So start with that first line, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, just like that, remember? And then going back in and just adding a little bit of shape to those leaves. They're wilty little leaves, so we're not doing them all nice and fat and vibrant and making them a little saggy. Just like that. And then once you have all three of those base leaves on, we're going to go in and we're going to add definition and finish up our pretty little pumpkin painting. Okay, give you just a second to get caught up on that. Okay, so moving on. What we're going to do is we're going to use our smallest brush again, and then going into that Scotland green Don't have to think about this too much. Kind of thinner acrylic type consistency. All I want you to do is first start adding a center line. It doesn't have to be heavy or solid, just working right off of those last couple hairs on your brush. Just add a little line right down the center. Now, let me explain something to you. When you add lines, which will be the vein to your leaves, there's a little trick that you can do. If I were to make a line right down the center, say of this leaf right here, you're kind of looking at that leaf straight on. The same concept as this section on your pumpkin. You're looking at that section more straight on. If you do a line more towards the outside edge of a leaf, now what you did is you've turned your focal point towards one side as being bigger. So now that leaf looks like it's turned away from you a little bit, if that makes any sense. So when you're adding the vines, you know, add some to one side or the other, but you're just sort of going straight down somewhere in the middle of that, and just sort of adding a quick little, I need more water in my paint, just a quick little line somewhere in that leaf. And then what you're also going to do is add just a little bit on the edges of those leaves too, just to define them a little bit more. It doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be, you know, a dark solid line all the way around your leaf. Just add a little tiny bit more here and there. Okay, maybe a little bit here. See how it's just defining those leaves a little bit more. Just going around them really quick. This is very abstract painting, so we're not going for realism or perfection on anything. Don't really have to think about those dark lines too much. Just a little bit here and there, and then we're going to go in with our yellow and add some highlights, but we're going to do something else to this middle leaf. I'm going to show you another trick with colors. So with the center leaf, the effect that we're going for is that this leaf is sort of a little more bent. And what I mean bent is, let me grab another paper towel. So this leaf is really sagging down on us, so we're just going to pretend that this is the leaf. And then the effect that we're going to create with color is we're going to sort of make this leaf look like it's actually bent like this. Now see how I'm holding this and it's darker on this side and it's lighter on this side? That's because our light source is coming from here. So this little trick I'm going to show you is going to sort of create that effect that that center leaf is bent. And how we do that is we take some of our darkest green, the Scotland green, and we add more to the side of our leaf. So this side of our leaf is very dark. So find that center line and just add a little more dark to that one side of the leaf and half of this here. Doesn't have to be solid, but definitely a lot more dark green than the other side. Okay, see how we've already created an effect that the side of the leaf is very far away from the darkness or the light source. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go in. This is our last little detail, and we'll be done. Just go in. Pick up some of that yellow, make it thick but paintable. Okay, pick up some of that yellow. And we're going to add yellow to all of our leaves. except we're going to add very, very little to this side. Okay, you can add a teeny tiny bit in there, just a tiny little bit, like it's maybe catching a little bit of light. But on this leaf, we're going to add a lot more yellow to this side of it because it's catching a lot more light source, which would be the moon in this case, just to that half. Then we're going to add just a little bit to those other two leaves, just a little bit here and there, just like that. Okay. And that is it. That is the end of our pumpkin painting. How pretty is that? While I'm online, does anybody have any questions about their pumpkin? Please, the people that were painting along with me who had the kits or the Sugarprism paint, please feel free to post pictures of your paintings in the event group on Painting with Sugarprism on Facebook. Go ahead and post them up there. I'd love to. Hey, Heather, how you doing? Thank you. Another pumpkin painting class. I hope everybody was able to follow along well enough. I'm just going up to see if there's any questions. If there's any questions I missed, just reach out to me. Just another little recap on Sugarprism paint. We're just mixing water into the dry mix. You can use it as a watercolor, acrylic. You can use it as an airbrush color. It works on everything. This was fondant. It works on gum paste. It works on macaron cookies, buttercream, bear cookies, pie dough. We're doing a pie decorating class in a couple days. You name it. It works on all types of chocolate, all types of chocolate. I have two different types of product for chocolate. I have this acrylic line, and then I also have a fat-based line. And that's it. If there aren't any questions, I'm going to save this video, and then it's going to take me a while to edit because these classes are several hours long, so I'm going to have to go through the whole video and edit, and then I'm going to post it to the event in a few days on the Painting with Sugarprism page. It'll be in the event section on pumpkin painting class number 3. And that's it. Thank you for joining in. It's been fun joining me for some classes. Hop on over to Painting with Sugarprism on Facebook. Take care. Bye.